I'm quite thrilled to show you some techniques with Power Builder. Doesn't matter which version of Power Builder, you can use that technique to create drag and drop and other cool user experience stuff to make some cool tools, some modern tools with Power Builder with the existing DataWindow. Well, that's a disclaimer. You've seen that a lot of times, I believe. Agenda. First, I'm going to do a little introduction about the technology and all the possibilities, the wide range of possibilities you can do with this small technology. It's like a tiny idea, and then you can build upon it, and you can build extraordinary stuff just with that idea. So I'm going to do a live programming demo where I build the basic idea of this calendar. This would be more or less the same as last year. Who has been to my presentation last year? That's not too many. So for most of you it would be probably new. And those who've already been there, I've added some stuff, I've added some information, and there are completely new tools I didn't show last year. So it's first a demo of this drag and drop calendar, and then I did a new tool, the graph. It's like it's how to create a graph with the same technology. And then in the end I'm going to give you some hints on design and on performance, because that technique could cause some performance issues very soon, because you're going to do a lot of actions within microseconds, and you need to be pretty careful about what to do and what's without problems and what's pretty hard. So I'm going to give you some hints about that. First, about me. I'm George. I'm from Switzerland. I do Power Builder since 9 or 10 years by now. I did a lot of SQL with SQL Anywhere. Before that, with MySQL as well. And my key skills are pretty much in usability and design, and in software architecture, which is my main job at the company where I work. My recent projects. I created a time recording module within our ERP system, our business software. Then later I did the shift calendar. Both of that required some graphical stuff. Time recording module required a calendar where you could record the absences, which employee has holidays, stuff like that. So you could record that in a graphical way with drag and drop, and that was mandatory for this new module, so I needed to make it possible. Same with the shift calendar. And now my current project, one of my current projects, is to introduce the new Power Builder 2017 R3. We're currently at testing and trying to migrate it. That's in progress. Our company is Informaticon. We have about 90 employees, about 50 Power Builder developers. We do a lot of customer adaptations within our software, and we have complete solutions. You see part of the modules we offer to our customers. That's just the icons. That's where I'm working. I'm at the development of the basic software where we build customer adaptations upon it. Okay, so much about that. Let's get into it. First, about the technology. It's a really simple approach, as I mentioned before. That simple approach came to me when my boss showed me like an article, PDF from a really old magazine. Does someone of you know that magazine? Okay. Last year I told that I saw that article, and some people asked me about what it was, and I didn't remember. So for this year's presentation I looked it up. So, but I just read a few lines on it. Now I saw it's even more in that article, but I didn't read that at the time I got to that idea I'm going to show you now. It's some more information, but it's really old, and I'm not sure if it's still usable. Some of it is. I'm going to look into it a little bit more later, but that's it. Well, thing is, what do you need to make a drag and drop user experience? You need a rectangle, you need a line, you need a little bit of text. Then you need to create, to resize, and to move visual objects in runtime. And you need an event where you can react to the mouse moving. Power Builder, or especially DataWindow, does serve you with all of that. That's pretty much it. So I'm going to show you how. And before I'm going to show that's the possibilities, just some impressions, what you can build with it. It's infinite, but just some impressions, drag and drop calendars. We're going to get deeply into that right now. Then visualizing data with graph. That's an example. I'm going to give you a quick view into that within that presentation. Then advanced selecting. I've done stuff like that with a shift calendar. I'm going to get some information about that in my next presentation tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And matrix views, that's using pretty much the same technology for recording data like a crosstab, but in a way you can actually use it. So that's the main part of the presentation of tomorrow, if someone's interested in that. Okay, let's get to the demo. First, I'm going to show you how that looks in our business software. That's actually our software we're selling to our customers, and that's the absence calendar. I'm going to expand that a little bit to have a little more space here. Okay, and now I can just select something here, that's holiday, and then I can drag the entry here. I can resize it like that. I can move it around. That's what it does. The other thing I wanted to show you, just a little peek, was the shift calendar. That's in another module. That's right here. Just hoping it's working. That's pretty much information within that. You see all those numbers. The numbers are the shift, like late shift or day shift or whatever. The colors are the absences. That's the same information like in the absence calendar. And then the red circles around here, that's if there's something wrong with the time recording. That's controlling of the recorded time. So it's a lot of information within that one view. And then you can select like that, and then you can add a shift, and then it's added, or you can select that area and copy, paste there. That's something else you can do in a similar way as what I'm showing. Okay, so far about that. Let's get into work. By the way, I have this example here, and you can download that example. I might get that to the platform for Appeon where they serve the downloads, but just if that doesn't work, it didn't really work last year, that's the link. You can write it down or take a picture, so you're sure you get it. Got it? Okay. Otherwise you can ask your neighbor. Okay. First, I'm just going to show you where we are going. If you download that, it has 3 targets. for this presentation, it's the first target. You're going to see it includes all my 3 presentation examples. Okay, we're going here. Just that you see, that's how far we're going to go here. But first, we're doing some live coding. For that, I don't need this one. I just prepared a simple window with the data window on it. I'm sure you all know how to do that. Okay, first is I take the data window. That's this one. And then I add a rounded rectangle. Make it a little bit bigger. Then I reduce that one. And I put the color to background, because you can do a little bit more over there. Then I just select some color. Let's make it purple. And then I add a little transparency. I think I can do it that way. So that's it. Now we want to move that rectangle. What do we do to move that? First, I need to know if the mouse is down or not. So I add an instance variable. I just call it active. Now I go to the clicked event of the data window. Where is it? There we go. Now, if we click on it, it's active, and then we have those additional events like a mouse up. You know how to create them? Like with that option here, you just need to choose the right event ID, and then we can say active is false, and then we need third event. That's the mouse move. That's also with the event ID, and here we just do anything if it's active. And what do we do? It's just a little modify. I think you know the function modify. It's all of that I'm doing now is based on that modify. And I just need to assign the X and Y position. It's called rr1.x, and the X and Y position is right here. X and Y, I have this as parameter. And then I can add a second command just by adding a space. Y equals, I forgot that one. And that's it. Let's test it. Live def, there's a rectangle, now we move it around. Pretty simple, right? You see now it's always on the upper left edge. You could fix that, but for this little, I think you can imagine how to fix that. Just by subtracting the half of the width of the element, you can get that by describe. But now we want to create new elements. That's the next step. Well, how to do that? We need to create an element. That's something else, but just modifying it. The easiest way to do that is go into the source of the data window where we already have that element, and then we see that element around here, rounded rectangle. I just copy the whole line and then go back here. Now I need to create that in the clicked event, not in the mouse move. Clicked event is here. I still want to put the active to true, but then I want to create that element. So I'm gonna add it, modify, just input it and save, because there's a Power Builder bug. Sometimes if you operate with these long lines, it crashes. So if you paste those things, I recommend to save frequently. And they didn't fix this with Power Builder 2017 R3, because I developed that here and I experienced that bug. We just put the keyword create in front of it, and now it's going to be created, but that's not enough for us. We want to put it on the right place. So we go here to the X. If only I could type. And the Y. Okay, now the position's right, and I did something wrong. I'm sure you know what. I missed the plus, yeah. Okay, and for height and width, I just put 10 pixels in, because I'm gonna change that in the mouse move event anyway. But there's another thing. I can save. Okay, that's pretty good. Cool. I'm gonna create more than one item, so that name isn't gonna work out. I need to create different names, so I add a variable for that. I just make it a little bit cheap, but in the other example I made it in a better way. So I just increase that number, plus, and then add it here. That's it, and then we don't want all of our rectangles to be the same color. So we want the background color. Let's search for that. There we go. And let's just do a random color. One closed, two closed, so that should be it. Okay, we have a random color, and now we need to pull the size, the right and the width and the height, and we're going to do that in the mouse move. Okay. Now we're just going to change a little bit of it. It's not anymore the 1, but the number, and then it's not X but width, and then the same here. Okay, and here's the height. But we can't just set width to the current mouse position value. But we need the difference between the current mouse position value and where we started dragging. So we need to save that into another long variable. Start X and start Y. Then add that here into the clicked, and that's pretty easy. Start Y equals YPOS. Alright, and then we can use that here. That's XPOS minus start X, and that one's Y pos minus start Y. Let's check if it works. I don't know. I forgot one thing. I forgot to go in there and delete that. We don't need that anymore. Let's close it here. Open in Graphical. Remove that one. Okay. Now let's see. That seems like it's working. And it's looking pretty cool. Fancy, right? You can do art like that. Thanks a lot. Okay, but that's pretty fancy looking. You can do art with it, but you actually can't sell that. So, if you can do it, you're welcome to try. Okay. But let's try to make something you can really sell as a business software from that approach. Well, that was the first step was moving. We already did that, and the second step was creating. That's the thing you get in the example you can download. Well, next step is create and move. You can create, but you can also move. I'm not gonna code that live because that would be too much. It would take too much time, and I think you would get bored with that. So that's why I prepared that. That's basic 3, and we added some stuff for that. It's mostly in the mouse move. I added a mode. I have a mode idle, that's where nothing happens. Then mode create, that's what you saw already, and the mode move. So when we click on an element, we decide whether there's a name. You know that DWO.name? You can determine if there's an element where you're clicking, and if so, you set the mode to mode move. Otherwise, you set it to mode create. And then in the mouse move event, you can choose if it's the mode move. You need to make some math to determine where did I start. It's like a vector. I started to move here. The mouse is currently here. So I need to get that x and that y and move the element by this vector. So I get the vector I moved with the mouse, and I need to move the element by the exact same vector. Here's the example. You can look that up yourself. Create is pretty much the same as before. It's just with comments, and I added some other stuff. That's to create an element that way. If you don't do anything about it, it kind of works, but you get negative widths and heights, and that looks pretty jumpy. And so if you want to implement it right, you need to think a little bit more. I implemented that here. In the current application, I didn't do that, because it's not really necessary usually, but you can. Course. Okay, next one, we need a grid. It's just you can create elements, but it's always within a grid. So that's necessary if you have a scale on maybe days or hours. You always want stuff to snap. And the snapping is pretty easy if you know how. That's number 4. Maybe you already know. I just created a function snap to grid. That function divides everything by the grid I have. In my program it's 50 pixels, and then multiply it by that grid again. That's it. And everywhere I use pixels, like in the mouse move, I always wrap it with this function snap to grid. And so that's it. That's all you need to do to snap it. And then next step is we want to make a calendar, so you need a fixed height, like that. So you can't create like rectangles, but just lines. Well, that's pretty straightforward. You just disable the adaptation of the Y position in the mouse move event. That would be here. If you in create and move, the Y position is that the right one? Yeah. The Y position can change, but the Y position can change, of course, because you can move it up and down. But when you create it, the Y position is fixed, so it doesn't change here in the mouse move event. All right, with that approach, I did the first calendar which went productive, and it worked. But there's a problem to that. We're still working with a data window at a really high detail area. That's all the detail band. And you put in all those elements into the detail band. Problem is you create a big amount of objects into that data window. And data windows can't handle that many objects if you have large amounts of employees shown and large amount of calendar entries. So it got really slow in creating, in building, in drawing for initial loading, and in behavior as well. So I tried another approach. The other approach was each row of the data window is one row where we actually show the data. So what I needed to do is have an element here, and we need to move that between the rows. That's actually a data window with rows. How to do that? If we draw an element into a data window with rows, usually it's shown on every row. We don't want that. So what we do here is create a visible expression. And hard thing is we need to create that visible expression dynamically. So I created a function. That function is called getRowExpression. And I just check if the ID of the row is the row I'm currently on. I show it, and otherwise I don't. So when I move that element in the mouse move right here, I say the visible expression of that data window is of getExpression of the row I want it to be on. So back to the example here. When I move right here, I get the row in the mouse move event. I know on which row the mouse is on. I just have to pass that row to that function that gets me the expression, and set the expression on the data window using modify. Okay. Now we know how to put an element on only one row. Yeah, your question.
Similarly work with the grids or not?
What?
Will that work with a grid data window?
Of course. With the grid data window.
Yes.
I only tried it with a tabular, because I don't know the benefit of using a grid right here. I don't think it would work. Yeah, it's just a tabular. Then next step is to put it all together. We know to thing is now we have to use different methods for either choosing the row or the width. And I think that's pretty straightforward. It's row-based 2 where I combined it all. I'm just going to show you a short look into the mouse move. It's just that I have, that's the move, and the visible, that's just a row, and that's the X position, right? Okay. It's just combination of the two. I think you can look that up yourself if you want to know how exactly you can work it out. But yeah.
How do you save your changes? When you save the data window and retrieve it, do you see the actual colors highlighted?
Well, save the changes. How to combine that thing with the database? That's not part of this presentation because I don't have the time for it. But come tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I think it's here again. I'm going to talk about that. Okay. Now let's see here. All combined, I can create entries, move them around. That's pretty much the same as we had before, but it's in an environment where it really works with lots of data and way better performance. Then I added resizing. I'm not going to show you that exactly because you can look that up yourself. I've commented it pretty good, so it should be self-explaining. Then I added the visual grid. You might ask yourself why this grid is blue with the white lines. I'm going to come to that afterwards in the slides. Up front, it's the easiest way to create a good look and feel. So it's looking good and it's not so hard to implement. And then I did the descriptions. The blue grid is pretty easy to do. You just draw a rectangle in each just one. You have to do it once because it's shown on every row, and it's just a rectangle one after another. That's it. And the descriptions here, I did that in the data window in a graphical way. So you don't even have to create that with modify. Okay. And that still works with the transparency of the entries. You can see the lines in the background. You see it here? I think so. Okay. That's still working. Okay. Before I go back to the slides and come to some additional things about design and performance, I want to show you something else. And that's the graph. Graph looking like that. That's pretty much the same thing, but I didn't use rectangles here, I just used lines. So first step here is just a grid. So that's a bunch of lines, nothing else. Lines in the horizontal, lines in vertical, and with different colors, different shapes. And then, well, that's just a grid. I can show you how it's done, but I'm not going very deep into that. I think you can imagine how it's done, and if you want to see it in detail, you can look it up yourself in the example. Draw grid is more or less a two-level for loop. With I need the two levels for. I have light grid and the dark grid. So I first do the dark ones for where I put the numbers underneath or on the side, and then I do the light one in the sub for loop. Okay, that's the grid, and then for the graph itself. I'm going a little bit deeper into that how to draw something like that graph in the presentation tomorrow. But a first idea how to put some data into a graphical thing. You have the data, so the data says, put me a point at, what's that, 122 at the y position and 40 at the x position, right? So you need a mapping between your data, that's 122 and 30, but in the pixels it's something completely different. So you don't know which amount of pixels it takes to get here. But to draw that graph, you need to know the pixels and not the value. So when you draw the grid, you need to know how many pixels is the difference between two lines. So you know the width of your screen, and you know how many like positions you want to draw. So you divide the pixels you have by the positions you want to draw, and you get your pixels per line. And then if you have that position here, you multiply that by your value, like pixels per position, and then you get here. Then you get your pixel position. That's how to get the data into that. And if you want to know how to save it, I think it's pretty much the same, but the other way around. More about that tomorrow. Okay, let's get back into the slides. Hints on design. Well, if you look at this calendar here, in the calendar of absences, just a calendar here, I think it looks pretty good. But the first version I made, that looked pretty shitty. So I made some improvements, and by now I have some hints for you so you maybe don't have to make the first version with a shitty design and go straight forward to a good design. First thing is reduce lines. Do lines only if you need them, because every line you do more makes the design worse. It's just you can try it yourself, and if you show two examples, one with more lines, one with less lines, most people would tell you the one with less lines is more beautiful. Then keep it flat. That's the thing with Power Builder. Flat design is pretty modern. If you look at Google Material Design, it's not exactly flat, but it's pretty flat. And with flat design, you can do a lot of cool things in an easy way. It's good looking, and it's easy working with Power Builder, because Power Builder can do rectangles, can do lines and text, and that's all you need for a flat design. And that's all you can, and you can do all of that with Power Builder. Then it might help to ask a designer. We did that for our own UI framework when we did a redesign of our UI. We asked a designing company to help us with the design, and that made it possible for us to do a design that's really it's not extraordinary, but it's state of the art. So it really helps. And then back to that blue background. That's an issue with Power Builder. The thing is, you have, if you do lines in a data window and you want to do a background for the whole line, Power Builder still does a background of a line of 1 pixel with the color of the background of the whole data window. You can't prevent that from happening. Okay, so usually the background of your data window is white, or it's button face. I don't recommend button face in general, but that's something else. For this example, I would recommend to make it white, and then put the blue boxes upon it. And if the blue boxes have the whole the entire height of the data window row height, you just get that white line as a separation between the rows, and that works totally fine. Now, what to do if you want to have a white background and black lines? You can either say, okay, I have that white line, I put a black line upon it or above it, and I don't care, but that's not going to look good. The other way is you make the background of your whole data window black. That's actually working, but you're never going to cover the whole data window with elements. So in the end, in the right end or in the bottom, you'll always have some space left, and you can't easily fill that. Just because if you do a grid, the grid is never gonna exactly work out with the exact pixels you have, because the grid is maybe you have 5 pixels per hour or per second or per day or whatever, and then you multiply it with the time you want to show, and there's always going to be a border in the right. You can calculate that border and then put a white rectangle on that position. I actually did that because the customer really needed to have the black border stuff, and it actually works. But there's some other things. What happens if you resize your window? You need to resize that part as well, and you're going to realize a few other issues with that. So you can make it working, but if you don't need to, I recommend to use the blue background. I tried gray. Blue is better because you see more colors on the blue. It's like the how to say, the contrast is better with the blue. It's just I tried many colors and blue was best. So that's what I recommend. Okay, hints on performance. That's some stuff which is without problems. You can do it, and it's not gonna affect the performance a lot. You can do data window groups, you can do summaries, you can do footers, and you can put in stuff in the graphical data window, no problem. One little issue. While the moving, if the mouse is over a group summary or a group header, you have the problem that the row, which is returned by the mouse move event, that row is anything you don't know. Usually it's 0. So you need to catch that, but that's not a big issue. You can just say if row is 0, don't do anything, and wait for the row to become a real number. You can do really complex visible expressions or even color expressions. For example, I did different colors for holidays. In Switzerland we have cantons, and those cantons have different holidays, like for the Monday after Easter. In some cantons that's a holiday, in others it isn't. So you need to change that for the employee rows. So you need to do different background colors, and you can do that with color expressions. You can set those dynamically, not a problem, and they can be quite complex. It doesn't affect the performance in a hard way. You can modify many objects at the same time. Last year I just told you to use the set redraw function. In the start, set redraw false. In the end, set redraw true. That works perfectly. There's another way. You can modify many objects at the same time with just adding them with a space in between. They told me it's a lot faster. I tried it. If you don't do the set redraw, you know the set redraw function. Okay, if you don't do that and do many modify function calls, it's really slow. But if you use the set redraw function or put all into one modify function, that doesn't really matter. That's my experience. I think it's best to put all in one modify function, but maybe for debugging it's easier to do several modify functions. But you need to be sure to set the redraw to false at the beginning, at the very beginning, and then set it to true at the very end. And don't change, don't call that multiple times, because that's gonna affect some problems. If you set redraw in between to true and then to false again, that's gonna make your application slow. You can do simple checks in mouse move, such as describe or string comparison or get item. That's not an issue. But biggest issues: performance intensive data window expressions. For instance, if you use global functions in data window expression, even if they're not set dynamically, if you already set them in the graphical data window editor, that's horrible, because your data window is on the limit of performance always, and global functions are quite demanding regarding performance, so you shouldn't do them at all in those graphical data windows. Too many objects in the data window. My experience is that starting from 5,000 objects in one data window, it's getting slow. It's getting slow in creation and it's getting slow in behavior. Well, 5,000 sounds like a lot. But now imagine you have maybe 200 employees, and then you're showing a whole year. And then each entry has one object for the rectangle, one for the text upon it, then one for, if I go back here on this application, it has this thing on the bottom that shows it's active. That's another element. Then we have the right and left arrow that shows it's possible to resize it. And then there might be others, like if you put it here, it shows that it's going further than it's actually there. It's two more elements. So each element has maybe 6 or 7, each calendar entry has 6 or 7 elements, 6 or 7 objects. So if you multiply that by the number of calendar entries you're gonna have, and then you have the background elements here for 1 year, that's going to add up, and you might reach those 5,000. Okay, and you shouldn't do performance intensive code in mouse move. So you should never do database access in the mouse move. And there's a hint to optimize that mouse move event. You can, if you do a modifier or a set item each time, that's horrible. But you just need to check if anything is really changed, and only do modify or set item if there were changes, and that's going to optimize your performance a lot. Some general hints on the performance: describe is a lot faster than modify. What does this mean? You can check if it's necessary to execute the modify by using describe first. If you don't know it already by maybe an instance variable, maybe you can just check it by describe. Reload. In my first calendar version, I just reassigned the data window, just set data window.data object equals empty string, and then reassigned it. So everything is deleted, and then I can start from scratch. But that's pretty slow. It's way faster if you just destroy all your elements and then create them again. You can destroy them with just modify, then destroy space name of the object. Easiest way to do that is you just remember all your objects in an array, for example. All the names of your objects you created in an array, and then if you reload, you just loop through that array and destroy all of them. That's really fast. And then you can recreate them. And with that calendar here, if I do reload, that's pretty fast, right? It's recreating all the entries. It's 1 or 2 seconds. The other way, if you reassign it, it's like 4, 5, 6 seconds. Okay, and then more expressions are better than more objects. So the more objects you create, the slower it gets. More expressions are not that bad. They just need to be pretty easy. Just no global functions and stuff like that. But you can use simple expressions or even complicated expressions with just if, else, or choose case or stuff like that as much as you want.